I've done two main theories and two mini theories on the contents of the Security Breach Ruin DLC, and those videos were about solving things within the DLC itself. However, I think that the videos I've done have covered most of the mysterious stuff within the DLC, but now what I want to do is look forward. I'd recommend watching my other theories on Ruin before this one, just because I think if you haven't, then you'd probably find them interesting, but if you don't feel like watching them all, you should at the very least check out my most recent mini theory on Cassie's dad, because it will be a little bit relevant. In this video, I want to look forward to what we might be seeing in the future of FNaF, including in Help Wanted 2 and beyond. So without further ado, let's get started. I think the funniest part of Ruin is that I barely got anything right. I made a prediction slash theory video about it back when the trailer for it came out, and looking back, I failed to predict the main plot. My main idea for the main plot was that the Afton ending would be the canon one, and that after being taken away by the Blob, Burntrap would take control of the Blob and become a game equivalent of the Afton amalgamation. I thought that the glitch bunny at the end of the Ruin trailer matched the design of Princess Quest Glitch Trap. Since we play as Cassie in Ruin, who gets the FNaF VR Vanny Mask, and Princess Quest has us play as Cassidy, who gets the FNaF VR Vanny Mask, I thought it was likely that the glitch bunny was the Afton amalgamation and that Ruin would parallel Princess Quest. I was kinda right about the latter half, but I was wrong in thinking that the glitch bunny was Princess Quest Glitch Trap. I was wrong in thinking that the Blob and Afton would combine. Or was I? See, Afton and the Blob combining to become the Afton amalgamation, or what I'll refer to as Blob Trap in this video just because it's less of a mouthful, was really heavily implied. I've discussed it in many videos in the past, but I'll go over it again, though I'll try to be relatively brief. The design of Princess Quest Glitch Trap shows many pieces of bunny ears, random squiggles, and eyes all over the place, just like how the Afton amalgamation is described in Epilogue 7 of Fazbear Frights, having random pieces and eyes all over the body. But if we compare Princess Quest Glitch Trap to the Blob, almost everything lines up perfectly. A comparison between the two can be seen on the screen right now. While not all the shapes are specific, some are, and the shapes and the positions of them as well as the eyes all match up with each other. Not only that, but Glitch Trap in Princess Quest reaches out to Cassidy with black tentacles, just like the Blob has. In Under Construction, Maya is unable to die in the simulation, and there's a flood of jelly creatures which could easily be described as blobs, which engulf her and essentially become one with her. Afton is unable to die and he always lives on, at least in some way like through the Mimic, and that could imply that he'll be engulfed into the Blob. The theory made so much sense, and I feel like it was so heavily implied, but it just didn't happen, and it's kind of weird. However, the Blob still does exist. We see him at the beginning of Ruin, and the area he's hanging out in seems to probably be the atrium, as it's right next to where he appeared. He escaped from under the Pizzaplex, and now he's probably in the ruined atrium. I mentioned in a previous Ruin theory that this area from Ruin was the atrium, but some people on Discord and in the comments made me realize that it's more likely Rockstar Row, given the shape, and both the atrium and Rockstar Row would bring us across the Pizzaplex, so it makes just as much sense. So what this means is that we just haven't seen the atrium in Ruin at all, and that's kind of weird. What I feel like that means is that the Blob is being built up for something else in the future, otherwise he's just a loose thread. Assuming Burntrap isn't the Mimic, which I talked about in my first Ruin theory, it's entirely possible that Burntrap was actually already incorporated into the Blob. Something else I mentioned in a previous theory is that both areas that we see the Blob in Ruin, his eyes are different. At the beginning, his eyes aren't glowing red, and in the comic page, his eyes are purple. While it might mean nothing, it's just really weird and interesting to me. It's very possible that Blob Trap could still be a thing, which could be explored in a future DLC or a future game. Many people have been speculating that Help Wanted 2 could continue the story of Ruin, but since it's Help Wanted 2, I highly doubt that, and I think it's just going to be a collection of minigames again with new additional lore. It's possible it won't be, but it would be a bit weird if it wasn't. But in the case that it's not, maybe we'll follow the story of Cassie exploring the crumbling Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, assuming it's under the Pizzaplex. I discussed this in my first Ruin mini-theory, but I wanted to fix that theory a little bit. Looking at the path in the Ruin ending, because of all the right turns, it actually brings us in almost a full circle, so the map actually doesn't perfectly align, at least not in exactly the way that I suggested. I suggested that if the Ruin ending layout was overlaid on the sister location breaker room map, that it would look something like this, but I didn't realize just how curved the area was. But interestingly enough, while the area doesn't align with the plush trap hallway or the scooping room, meaning I was wrong, so I apologize for the people that put a lot of faith in that theory, it actually strangely does line up with something else that we don't see on the breaker room map, but that we know is in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. This is what a more accurate layout of the map would look like. Yeah, I was way off. I actually wasn't even close. It doesn't disprove sister location being under the Pizzaplex, in fact, I'm still pretty confident about that, but it does confirm that the scooping room in Ruin isn't the same one from sister location, renovated or otherwise. Now, you may be wondering what exactly the elevator ending lines up with, and to answer that question, I turn your attention to FNaF Help Wanted and its vent repair level with Ennard. In that minigame, we go down an elevator in Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, a very different elevator to the one we started in, by the way, and one of the rooms we passed by,
Motion Trigger, Breaker Room.
The Breaker Room, meaning the elevator is next to the Breaker Room, and it just so happens that at the end of Ruin, we find an elevator which, overlaid on the sister location Breaker Room map, leads right next to the Breaker Room. Could it be a coincidence? Sure, but I don't really think that it is. So, going back to what I was saying, if Help Wanted 2 actually was its own story, it could potentially continue Cassie's story since she does seem to still be alive, and it could actually be similar to my initial idea for Ruin. A long time ago, I made a fan-made Ruin pre-write, and looking back it really wasn't good, but one of the ideas that I had was that Blob Trap would happen and Gregory and Freddy would be trapped underground, so they have to find their way into the sister location bunker and eventually find their way back up to the Pizzaplex. If Help Wanted 2 wasn't a collection of minigames, it could have Cassie be trapped underground and she could find her way through the sister location bunker and find her way back up and possibly end up in the atrium where the blob, possibly with Burntrap inside him, is found. Imagine a boss battle against a 15-foot tall amalgamation of animatronics including Burntrap towering over you in VR. That would be so cool, and if that isn't Help Wanted 2, then something like that could happen in a future FNaF game or DLC, whether it's VR or not, more likely not. In the case that Help Wanted 2 is a collection of minigames like the first Help Wanted though, what kind of minigames would be included? Sister location would be a given, but I think we could also see a more accurate depiction of FNaF 4, which would be terrifying, but also FNaF 6. I feel like FNaF 6 is the FNaF game that would be the most terrifying in VR, outside of maybe FNaF 4. I don't have a PC VR headset, so I have no idea what the FNaF 6 VR fan game is like, but I can only imagine it's terrifying. But what else could they do? Some people have been speculating that Security Breach in some way could be in Help Wanted 2, but if that were the case, I don't think Help Wanted 2 could be canon, and considering the first Help Wanted was, I doubt the second one won't. I also think that there will probably be some levels that involve a Phaz Wrench, considering the Phaz Wrench conduit task does appear in the sister location elevator in the Help Wanted 2 trailer. We could also be playing as Cassie's dad, as I mentioned in the last mini-theory, and part of the game could be testing the knowledge of technicians to see if they're fit for the job. I also wonder, when would the game take place, and what would the main story be? It could be before Security Breach and could still have Glitch Trap, or it may even be Fazbear Entertainment continuing the company even after Ruin, possibly setting up a new villain or continuing with the Mimic. Speaking of a new villain, after the Mimic is killed for good, who could the next villain be? Well, my idea completely depends on what theory you believe, and when I say that, I mean regarding the Fazbear Fright's canonicity. In the story Lally's Game from the first Tales from the Pizzaplex book, the end of the story has white eyes peering over the top of the box, which is now in the attic, along with the other stuff Cade and his fiancée basically just keep as memorabilia. But in the final Fazbear Frights epilogue, when Larson is getting visions of Eleanor, finds Eleanor inside a box in an attic with stuff that seemed like memorabilia. Eleanor was responsible for Lally's Game. This could mean a few different things. For one, it could mean that Eleanor somehow comes back even after the final epilogue and that those Stitch Wraith Stingers are in the games, or another possible option is that they're not, but that Tails are, so it's basically saying that Eleanor is responsible even if it's not necessarily the same Eleanor. Under the theory that I believe, the timeline splits after FNaF 6, one side leading to the Fazbear Fright stuff and the other leading to the Pizzaplex and the Tails era, and since Eleanor was created before the events of FNaF 6, she would exist in both timeline branches. If that's the case, then wouldn't she still be around in the games? And if that's the case, then where would she be in the games? Would it be a little strange to just have her as a villain again, but in the games? Yeah, maybe, and some of you may believe that the Frights epilogues are in the games, in which case Eleanor is just already dead, or you could believe that she somehow escaped the nightmare she was trapped in, which would explain Lally's Game since it's after everything. But why am I bringing up Eleanor? Now, as I said, while it would be a bit weird for her to just be the villain again, it could make sense. There's a theory that states that Eleanor is actually Shadow Freddy, and this comes from the fact that Shadow Freddy is Nightmare according to the FNaF 4 files, and the fact that he's a dark reflection of Fredbear and is see-through and ghostly, and Nightmare says in Ultimate Custom Night that he is William's wickedness made of flesh. Shadow Freddy is essentially the evil of William, probably created after William killed Charlotte or maybe the missing children or something. Eleanor being Shadow Freddy could make sense in that regard, since Eleanor is a shadow character created from evil and agony, and is heavily associated with William Afton. So Eleanor and Nightmare could potentially be the same entity. Nightmare in the FNaF 4 Halloween DLC is actually replaced by Nightmarion, so while he is also connected to the puppet, the actual Nightmarion entity is the same character as Nightmare, and by extension Shadow Freddy. The reason I'm not bringing this up is because of all the Nightmarion imagery in Security Breach, with the Nightmarion staff bots, the Nightmarion plushies, which are referred to as simply the Nightmare plushies, and also the tentacles the Blob has when the only 3 other characters that we see with tentacles in the series are the puppet, Nightmarion, and very interestingly, Eleanor, who could theoretically be the same character as Nightmarion. This isn't necessarily to say that any of these characters are the Blob, but it seems like it's trying to hint at Eleanor or Shadow Freddy being important in the story going forward. And hell, even the character encyclopedia hints at that. While many people don't find this book to be reliable, I think it can be to a certain extent. It's not very strong to use as the basis for a theory, but as supplementary evidence I think it's valid. And what does the character encyclopedia say about Shadow Freddy? Quote, "We don't know much about him. Will he turn out to be a crucial character in the ongoing mythology of Five Nights at Freddy's? Maybe, maybe not. Time will tell." It's not really definitive, but it really seems to be hinting at something. So it's entirely possible that maybe after the Mimic, or even maybe alongside the Mimic, Shadow Freddy or Eleanor could be an important villain for the future of FNaF. If you don't think that Frights is in the games, or even connected to the games in any regard beyond parallels, then it's easy to think that Eleanor is just a parallel to Shadow Freddy, meaning Shadow Freddy could still be a future villain. If you think that Eleanor is dead, maybe you can think that Shadow Freddy isn't Eleanor. The theory works no matter which way you look at it, but if it were to be true, where would we see this come into fruition? Well, while the character clearly existed beforehand, Nightmarion, at least from an in-universe public standpoint, came from the FNaF VR game, according to the Nightmare plushie's description in Ruin, so it's entirely possible that the sequel to Nightmarion's debut game could be what paves the way for his eventual extreme villainy. Of course, this is mostly just speculation, but I think the theory makes a lot of sense, and I'm curious to know your thoughts. The last thing I want to bring up is something I talked about in a video from a while ago, which was pretty similar in concept to this one. I would have just played you the clip from that video, but it was honestly really bad, so I decided to just re-record it. Back after Ultimate Custom Night released, Scott made a mega thread of the upcoming FNaF projects, one of which was a game called FNaF Into Madness. After a while, the game was said to be on hold. It was supposed to be a collection of minigames in a similar vein to Update 2 from FNaF World. Everyone thought Into Madness was over and done with, but in Security Breach's files, the Balloon World arcade minigame is actually named Into Madness. Balloon World is canonically a part of the Arcade Conspiracy, a link between a bunch of different arcade games in Security Breach, a bunch of minigames, just like how Into Madness was planned to be. The Help Wanted mobile port introduced Princess Quest, which ended up in a future FNaF game, that being Security Breach. What if Balloon World is doing the same thing, where it's a minigame that will also appear in a future FNaF game, that being Into Madness? What if Into Madness ends up being a game about the Arcade Conspiracy? Those Balloon Circus characters could also be involved if this is the case, doing something like what they did with Princess Quest and adding new additional versions of the minigames, possibly like a Balloon World 2 with characters like that. Who knows? But that is everything I wanted to talk about for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to. Let me know in the comments whether you agree or disagree, and let me know what ideas you have for the future of FNaF. This wraps up all my currently planned theories for Security Breach's Ruin DLC. But I'm sure soon enough there will be more to theorize about, and while Ruin theories are finished for the time being, there's still a couple other videos on Ruin content that I want to do, and I'm unsure at the moment, but I may do a stream replaying the whole thing and getting all the secrets. But with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye guys!